The first undeniable reference outside the Gospel referring to the figure of Jesus is in Jewish antiquities, specifically Jewish Antiquities 1863-64, known among church history scholars as the Testimonium Flavianum. Josephus, a Jewish historian writing around 93-94 AD, mentions Jesus in two passages in his Antiquities of the Jews. One passage, known as the Testimonium Flavianum, has been partially interpolated by later Christian scribes, but many scholars believe that it contains an authentic core describing Jesus as a teacher who was crucified under Pilate, in Latin Pontius Pilatus. The most common translation of the passage reads as follows, open quotes, "At this time there was Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one should call him a man, for he was a doer of extraordinary deeds, a teacher of men, who received the truth with pleasure, and he attracted many Jews and many of the Greeks also. This was the Christ. And when Pilate, upon the accusation of the principal men among us, punished him by crucifixion, those who had first loved him did not cease, for he appeared to them on the third day, living again, the divine prophets having foretold these and thousands of other wonders concerning him. And even now the tribe of Christians named after him has not died out." First, note that I stressed in red the words wise, for obvious reasons, but also the word accusation. Now we will come back to what the word accusation actually means from a Roman legal standpoint, as that will give massive credibility to a passage that is often attacked by mythicists. That is because they haven't studied Roman law. Now this about the accusation is something you may have heard before, so keep watching. Now this idea of the accusation may be something you have heard before, so keep watching in order to get a proper, correct interpretation, so that you too will know how to defend it. But let's focus on the first red word, wise. First wise king, now wise man. It is possible that wise was indeed a descriptive term commonly used to refer to him, and you will see that it will come back again. Now the Testimonium Flavianum is valid. However, it's a problematic contribution, and that is because manuscript copies of Jewish antiquities are all from the 11th century or later, and it's practically certain that they underwent interpolation by Christian copyists. In simple terms, Christian monks added Christian concepts into the original core, and these Josephus did not write. Logically, even though this unfortunately takes away from the power and historical weight of this testimony, a solution would be to identify and remove those interpolated sections in order to return the passage to its unaltered origins, rectifying its full validity. But how can we do that? Now, there are several phrases that could be considered to be incriminated. The sentence, "if indeed one should call him a man, this was the Christ," the reference to the resurrection. These are evidently the results of Christian thought, and a non-Christian Jew, like Josephus, wouldn't say these things, just as a matter of deductive logic. Now, because of these obviously apocryphal elements, for a long time, a current of scholars claimed that the Testimonium Flavianum was a forgery in its entirety, inserted into Jewish antiquities with the intent to strengthen the historicity of Jesus' figure. Now, this is an overreaction, and there is no academic justification whatsoever for such a categorical rejection. Also because, as we said before, no one questioned the historicity of Jesus in period, so there would be no need to try and strengthen his historicity. If anything, they would want to preach his divinity. That makes contextual sense within this period. Now, in reality, even though it's very likely that Josephus' original work was indeed interpolated, as we explained, and that is indeed the position of my team and I, the most probable and honest interpretation is that the original core was authentic. However, this is clearly just a logical connection, and it's not enough to demonstrate that the rest of the testimony is real. But it doesn't matter, because we have something else. You see, the proof of its original core and what it actually said came with the 1971 publication by Professor Shlomo Pines of a different version of the Testimonium, emerging from the Book of the Title, a work in Arabic by Melkite Bishop Agapius, written in the 10th century AD. Agapius, who cites Josephus, reports the same testimonium, but this time it is indeed missing those sections we think were later additions by Christian monks, giving us a fantastic opportunity to spot the differences. So let's do that. Let's read it. Open quotes. "At this time there lived a wise man called Jesus, and his conduct was irreproachable, and he was known as a virtuous man. And many among the Jews and other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and die, and those who had become his disciples did not abandon their loyalty to him. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion, and that he was alive. Consequently, they believed that he was the Messiah, of whom the prophets had told wonders. Close quotes. In light of Agapius' source, it can be affirmed that the testimonium flavianum was present indeed in the original text of Jewish antiquities, albeit in a different form from what has been transmitted to us. The Christian monks, as we were saying, added sections to strengthen the concept of his divinity, but they were not trying to confirm his historicity, which was never in question, whether by Christians, pagans, Jews, or Muslims. No one questioned his historicity in period. The Arabic citation is much closer to what must have been Josephus' original text. Moreover, and this is really the frosting on the cake, it's appropriate to remember that Jesus is mentioned on another passage of Jewish Antiquities 29:1. Now, for context, this passage speaks specifically about the condemnation by stoning by the Sanhedrin, presided by a Sadducean high priest by the name of Ananus, of a certain, open quotes, brother of Jesus who was called Christ, whose name was James, close quotes. Clearly, James the Just.